spaceship, and I'm going to launch this into the air. We're going to fly over the city. I'm going to blow your minds with some San Antonio facts. I'm going to use my most enthusiastic voice telling you which buildings are interesting. But first, you're going to tell me where you're from. How about that? Well, you guys just kind of start telling where's people from? Where? You're from Spain? Temple, Texas? Denver? I've been to Denver.
We're not from Texas. Okay.
Kansas, I've been there. Anywhere else? San Angelo, all right. Any other locations? Florida, nice. Well, wherever you're from, welcome to our city. Welcome to San Antonio. I'm born and raised here. I do have some rules for you. While you're on the boat, I have 4 big rules. Rule number 1 is about your butt. Your butt stay in your seat. Don't stand. Even if you're just taking pictures all the way until the ride is over and I have the boat tied up at the end. Rule number 2 has to do with your fingers. So we have these low bridges that go they'll be right over your head. As we go underneath them, you will feel a strong desire to touch them. Don't do that. Keep your little squishy, injurable fingers inside the boat at all times. Rule number 3, don't be annoying. I hope you can figure that out. I'm usually talking to people who take phone calls, loud phone calls, or just being loud. If you are disrupting other people who are trying to listen to my melodious voice, that you're an obnoxious person. Avoid that. And rule number 4 is no smoking. Those are the rules. I will enforce my rules. Everybody needs to know right now that I am a stern captain. Stern. That's a funny boat joke. It's really good. It's delivered perfectly. Okay, I have like 5 jokes. So let's get started. This is a real river. This is the San Antonio River that's been flowing for 15,000 years. The San Antonio River comes out of the San Antonio Spring, and that is about 5 miles north. And human beings have been living on this river for about 5,000 years. The people who lived here in the 1600s, when the missionaries first showed up, were called Hayaga. Now, at this very moment, we are on a natural part of the river. About half of this river is man-made, half of it is natural, and you can actually tell the difference just by looking at the trees. You see how we're passing by some really big trees? These are called fall cypress trees. These are some of the longest living trees on Earth. They can live for thousands of years. These ones aren't that old, but they have that potential, and these ones are generally about 200 or 300 years old. So you know right now we're on the natural part of the river. That's a magnolia tree. We have like 3 of those, I think. So we're on a natural river. We're passing by the Alamo. You see this hotel in front of us? The Hyatt Regency? This is built in 1981. It's built into the riverbank, which used to have the Alamo at the top of it. Today the Alamo's up there, but most of it's gone. Most of the Alamo was destroyed in the Battle of the Alamo. Today we probably have less than 2% of the actual building. If you were in this exact spot 200 years ago, you would see the perimeter walls about maybe 300 feet more or less. You see how there's like a little river that goes through the hotel? That's supposed to be symbolic of the old aqueduct system. They used to pull water from the river up to the Alamo back in the 1700s when it was used as a mission. To be really pedantic, when someone is talking about the Alamo, they're talking about the building, not the mission. The mission was called Mission San Antonio. The Alamo is the structure, the limestone wall. Today, there are 5 missions of San Antonio. Only one of them still has the external wall. And that's because they were built with limestone. That's what like half of Texas is. Half of Texas was under the ocean for millions of years. So the ground here is all limestone. Limestone is really good for building. You know, it's good. It's easy to cut. You can make cement out of it. There's a lot of construction purposes, but it's not good for defense. A wall made out of limestone has absolutely no defense against like artillery. So like everyone heard about the Battle of the Alamo. When the Battle of the Alamo started, the walls were pretty much gone within an hour. And that's because they're just not built for that. Limestone's very soft rock, which is what makes it easy to work with, but also just bad for defense. Anyway, if you want to see a full mission, like really what they looked like 300 years ago, go down to Mission San Jose. It's about 5 miles down the river. This is a good spot over here where all the restaurants are to talk about Robert Hudman. Robert Hudman is the father of the Riverwalk. Robert Hudman, back in 1929, the city of San Antonio built the flood channel. I will show you the flood channel in a few minutes. When they built that flood channel, that inspired a local architect to design the Riverwalk. He thought, as long as we know it's not going to flood, let's turn this into a tourist destination. He wanted to, everything you see around you right here, this is what he wanted. He wanted sidewalk, space for shops and restaurants, and footbridges, the water to keep the little boats to go down, and he wanted to call it the Shops of Oregon and Romulus, which is not a good name. That's what he wanted to call it. But nobody ever called it that. Called it the Riverwalk. They got it built. If you look over here, there's the mariachi band. Right above the mariachi band, there is his name. You can see his office. It says Architect R.H.H. Hudman. That's his office. When the Riverwalk finally opened in 1941, he put his office there. And he was there by himself for 5 years. Because he did not have proof that the Riverwalk was safe from flooding. Like, there was a flood system, but it had flooded. So there was a proof. So nobody wanted to go to a restaurant until there was some proof. Well, he got some proof in 1945. The river did in fact flood, and but the water down here never got above the sidewalk, which meant that it was ready to go. So the very next year, in 1946, the first restaurant opened on the Riverwalk, and that restaurant is this one right here. Everybody look to the right. This is the Casa Rio. This is where it all began. What you're looking at right here, this is iconic San Antonio. Some of the most beautiful people you'll ever see eating delicious Mexican food under colored umbrellas with mariachi bands in the background sometimes. And this is where you would rent paddle boats back in the day. Before we had these narrated tours, you would rent paddle boats and canoes and you kind of entertain yourself. We also did have gondola rides. Like there was like these 5-person boats that would kind of sit in line and someone would push the boat along with a stick. Which I still wish we did. I would love if we could do this with we do like private tours on gondolas. I've done that before. I have pushed tour boats with sticks before. I lived in Hawaii, and I gotta tell you though, pushing like 20 people in a boat with a stick is just way more manly than using an electric throttle. It's just I was in a lot better shape there. You know, I could just do it with one hand and just shove people down the river with my easy arms. But we got electric boats here. Anyway, this part of the river was built in the 60s. In preparation for the 1968 World Fair, we were beautifying the city. They added a lot of what the downtown area looks like today is because of everything they built in the 60s, getting ready for the 1968 World Fair here in San Antonio. World fairs used to be really big deals, and if you're hosting one, you know you can expect millions of people. So San Antonio was very excited to host one, and they built a lot of stuff, which includes this whole stretch of river right here. We also stole a bunch of ideas from Seattle. Anyone ever been to Seattle? If you go to Seattle today, there is a monorail that goes around the downtown area. It's been running for 60 years. We built one too. We had a monorail here in San Antonio. Ours lasted for about 3 weeks. It fell over. It was kind of a mess. I think they built it a little too fast. But we also, there's a very famous building in Seattle. Can anybody tell me what that is? Space Needle was built in 1962 for the Seattle World Fair. And 6 years later, we did pretty much the same thing, and it's over here on the right-hand side. It's a little different, it's a little taller, but it's called the Tower of the Americas. Yeah. There's a restaurant just like the Space Needle. The top floor is an observation deck. If you buy tickets, you can go up there and look out over the city. But you know what's really cool about our building? How they built the elevator shaft. Like, can everybody look at like the shape of it? You know what that is? That actually is giant churro. So that's the world's largest churro, and they just stuck it in the ground. If you don't believe me, you can go look it.
He's being funny. You're supposed to laugh.
Yeah? Go up there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This part of the river is the most recent addition. It's about 34 years old. They dug this part of the river out, made the river a little longer for the River Center Mall. Somebody use my announcer voice for a second. The River Center Mall is the second largest mall in San Antonio. It's more than 1 million square feet of shopping space, 135 shops, a Legoland, a Sea Life Discovery Center aquarium, 2 movie theaters, and a food store, and one time I bought some shoes here.
I like seeing the Riverwalk.
I don't have a lot of mall toys.
I don't really like walking down. Like how we
I've always wanted to take the boat.
I did go on a
Never
date here
did.
once with a Russian
Never
woman.
came.
Actually, not worth talking about at all. It was a talking date. But it happened. Again, I kind of struggle over here a little bit just because there's not much history. It's a 34-year-old shopping mall. But let me see if the duck is there right now. There's a duck sitting on an egg. You guys want to see duck sitting on an egg? Alright, see if she's there. She's not there. Oh, here she is. Yeah, she's not there. Well, there's, you see these big tall pots over here? To my left. Oh, yes, she is. Yes, she's there. You can barely see her head. Her head's down really low right now. But you see this pot that's directly behind me? Directly behind me? She's in there, but her head's down really low, so you can't tell. But yeah, there's about 10 eggs up there. Which is kind of, what, yeah? What's your question? I don't know what you mean. Do we have native animals? Yeah, we do have some native animals. Like, we have the ducks, we have herons, we have snakes and turtles and fish. We also have a lot of animals that aren't supposed to be here. That's usually when I'm going to the mall, I like to answer questions. Because, like I said, I don't have a lot of stories here other than the Russian lady.
Any questions?
Yeah, so we have, you know what alligator bars are? We have alligator bars here. I've never seen them, but the old timers have said that they've seen them here. Yeah, they're like they're really big. They only say they're like the bottom of the river. It's very rare to see them, but we have them here. So you're actually allowed to fish in the river, but not where the boats go. And you can kayak and stuff, but again, not where the boats are. Another common question. So we get asked about the animals. We get asked about the depth of the river. It's about 14 feet for most of it, and then there's the flood channel, which is about 20 feet deep.
Flood channel.
Also, people ask me how often people fall in. I've seen it once. I've been here 2 years. I saw one guy fall in the river, and it was a guy who jumped off of a bridge trying to get into my boat. Apparently, he was running from the police, and he saw like this wheelchair area here, and he thought he could make it, and he missed, and he went inches back over the stern there, which I'm glad. I think if he hit my boat, he would have seriously injured himself or someone on my boat, or me. Anyway, I tried to pull him out of the water. He didn't take my hand and swim away. The police picked him up. That's the whole story. The Payana people call this river Yanaguana. That means something like spiritual waters or peaceful waters or something like that. But when the missionaries showed up, when the Spanish Catholic missionaries arrived here in the late 1600s, they named the river, everybody looked to the right-hand side, they named the river after that guy right there. That is San Antonio. That guy holding the baby, the baby Jesus. That is a Portuguese saint. Is anybody Catholic?
Yeah.
It is explained to me by Catholics that San Antonio de Padua is the patron saint of lost possessions and finding a boyfriend and selling your house. So he's very important. And the Catholic Church has always held him in high regard. There is a day, there's June 13th, which is the day of Feast of St. Anthony, and supposedly that's the day the missionaries actually found the river. Now, that is kind of a legend, and we don't really have any hard proof, but supposedly they felt like the river was a gift from San Antonio, and so they called it Rio San Antonio. Now there's a cathedral over here on the right in St. Joseph, up on the street level, the other side of the trees there. St. Joseph is built by German immigrants. We had a lot of German immigrants in the 1800s. Germany did not exist until the late 1800s as a country, but there were a lot of Germanic people, and they were moving here to the United States and to Texas, but they like to keep to themselves. They like to have their own communities and their own space. That's why they built that cathedral, St. Joseph. That's also why, if you look at the map, if you pull the map of San Antonio right now, you will see a lot of German names around San Antonio, like Bernie, Green, Fredericksburg, Luckenbach, New Braunfels. These are all little German towns. The truth is, a lot of Germans were abolitionists, and they did not want to get involved. They did not like slavery. They were uncomfortable with slavery, and did not like, and just didn't want to get involved with politics. And unfortunately, Texas was a slave-owning state during the Civil War. In fact, Texas continued to practice slavery after the Civil War, which was not so bad. But this is how we get Juneteenth. Everybody know about Juneteenth? As of last year, it's a federal holiday. It's been a Texas holiday for about 50 years. And the story is that the Civil War ends in April 1865. And Texas continued practicing slavery because Texas is so vast that people here either did not hear about it, did not hear about the law, or they just pretended not to, and they hoped that no one would come all the way out here to enforce it. So on June 19, 1865, 2 months after the Civil War was over, a ship full of federal agents lands in Galveston. At the time it was the second largest city in Texas. Today it's a small coastal city next to Houston. And the commander of the soldiers on the ship was named Gordon Granger. He read a declaration in the Texas courthouse saying that Texas had to follow the law. And he spent a whole year marching around the state, going to cities all over the state, reading that declaration over and over. He came here to San Antonio. And so a year later, on June 19, 1866, there was a jubilee in Galveston celebrating that declaration. And so it got really popular over there in Texas because people who had been slaves here in Texas, after they were freed, a lot of them moved over to the east part and into Louisiana. And so it was kind of an East Texas holiday for a long time, and then it was a state holiday about 50 years ago, and this year it's a national holiday. Here's the story. They did pass a law last June to make it a federal holiday, and I read, I watched some of those speeches they gave, and this is kind of a personal note, but I watched some of the speeches they gave after voting on it, and none of the speeches about Juneteenth mentioned Texas, and that really bugged me. So now I talk about it on my tour. Over here in front of us is La Vista, the little village. This is where San Antonio was born. 300 years ago, the King of Spain sent people from the Canary Islands to start a town here. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering why I have these Florence whitebees, these really pretty birds above the boat. Right above us. Those are called yellow-crowned night herons. They are beautiful birds. They're really cool. But when they poop, it's a giant mess. So if you need these, They're migrating right now through San Antonio. They will likely be the last thing that those baby ducklings see once they're born, if you get my drift. Anyway, so this is La Villita this is a little river theater in La Villita. This celebrates the birthplace of San Antonio. You see the architecture of the box office or the backdrop of the stage either side? That's supposed to look like what those early homes would have looked like 300 years ago. Those original historical homes are gone, but they would have looked a lot like this. And we did shoot a movie here. Hollywood shot a movie there like 20 years ago. Sandra Bullock was in it. I genuinely do not care about it at all, but it happened. If you know what it is, then pinpoint. What's its name? You don't know? I feel like you know.
I don't. I really don't. I can't say.
This congeniality. But I've never seen it. You guys know who Andrew Carnegie was? One of the richest humans that have ever lived on planet Earth. He had a company called U.S. Steel. And he would donate steel to cities to build public buildings. And Andrew Carnegie, if you were alive today, he'd be worth about $400 billion. He gave us the steel. And we built that building right there. This was our library. Today, this is the Briscoe Western Art Museum. It's a beautiful art museum. Definitely check it out if you have a chance. But in 1930, it was our library, which doesn't sound exciting until I tell you there were circus stuff in the library. You have to understand, Americans were obsessed with circuses for a long time. So in the library, there was a little collection of circus stuff, and it was really popular. And it got bigger. And it kept growing and growing, and by 1950, that entire building had become a circus museum. It was called the Hertzberg, and it was actually a really fun place to go with your family. There was a lot of stuff to do. There was entertainers there. Like there was a lot of clowns there. The clowns would play with your kids. That did not used to be a creepy phrase. We used to like clowns in the United States. Like, you know, Ronald McDonald? Ronald McDonald was a product of the 60s, back when clowns were cute and funny and silly. But something changed in the 80s. Anybody know why? Yes. The book and the movie changed the culture. That movie killed once the contracts started being creepy, it killed that museum. By the 90s, it just kind of died a slow death. I never got to go. It was there when I was a kid, and I knew about it, and I asked my mom if we could go to the circus museum, and I remember her telling me that it was a weird, creepy, sad place that nobody goes to anymore. She didn't want to spend money on it, so I never got to go. They closed it down in the late 90s, they turned it into an art museum, and that's the story of how Stephen King ruined San Antonio. The first Catholic Mass was held right over here on this island, over my right-hand shoulder. This big tree, this island, this tree is where the first Catholic Mass was held, and the Catholic. You guys see Baby Declan? You guys see Baby Declan? There's a behind me. There's one behind me. Look at you. Good for you. You keep those babies alive, okay?
How cute.
What does she have? She has 7. She has 7. All right. I'm rooting for you. I'm rooting for your babies. Keep them alive, okay? I appreciate it. Oh, there's more? There's 3 more. All right. Well, yeah, this is the time of year that this is the time of year where it gets brutal. So all the baby ducklings are hatching and the herons are coming in, and it's survival of the fittest. And there is a really big difference in the mothering and to how many babies survive. If the mothers keep them in a tight little group, they have a pretty good chance. But some mama ducks are really negligent. I've seen mama ducks with their babies just scattered out 20 feet, and they never make it. Because there's a hawk that lives up here. I believe it's a red-shouldered hawk. I'm not sure, but I think that's what it is. Beautiful hawk. But I think there's 2 of them that live somewhere on this skyscraper over here to the west. This is called the Tower Life Building. It's actually the first skyscraper in Texas. It has gargoyles up there. You guys see the gargoyles? Have you ever seen the movie Ghostbusters? This building was not in that movie. But it kind of looks like it, right? That's because if you are a rich person back in the 1800s, a rich person in New York, Chicago, Detroit, Boston, in a big city, and you're building a big building, and you want people to know that your building is expensive, what do? You put French stuff on it. This Gothic stuff is inspired by Gothic cathedrals in Paris, France. You guys see the creepy faces underneath the windows? That's part of Gothic artwork or Gothic architecture. There's like all that stuff above the windows and stuff. It's all Gothic. Anyway, so here in Texas, Texas started getting rich too in the early 1900s because in 1901, Texas discovered oil, and San Antonio was the biggest city of Texas. And everybody started moving here, and there were these two brothers called the Smith brothers. They believed San Antonio was going to be like the next New York. And so the way they wanted to make that happen was to build a New York-style skyscraper. That's what that was. When they built that, that was taller than every other building in the United States west of the Mississippi River, and it had a freaking Sears in it. I cannot tell you how excited people of San Antonio were to get a Sears and Roebuck here in Texas, and it was these 5 stories down here at the bottom. And and everybody believed that in a few years, we would have a dozen of these things. Because the economy was doing really good. But it was 1929. Anybody know what happened in 1929? Stock market crash. Everybody lost all their money. Nobody had any room. Nobody had any use for a fancy office building. Unfortunately, it was a disaster for that building, and it was a disaster for everybody. But nobody built anything like that in San Antonio for a long time. There's like a 35-year gap between that skyscraper and any of the other skyscrapers here in San Antonio. That's why when you're driving on the highway and you look at our skyline, you will notice the one with the green roof kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. It looks like it's from a different time period. It really is. A lot of investment after that fiasco, moved to cities like Houston and Dallas. That's part of the reason why San Antonio is not the #1 city anymore. Because Houston and Dallas outgrew San Antonio in the 50s and 60s. This part of the river is man-made. This is a flood channel. In fact, most of the water in the river is right here, underneath us. If you go up north about 5 miles, there is a flood basin. Around the spring, there's a flood basin. The flood basin can fill with water. If it rains the right way, it can actually send a wall of water through the downtown area. That's happened before. Back in 1921, there was a crazy flood where the water went from where it is in the river to about 10 feet above the street level very, very quickly. Nobody was ready for it. A lot of people died, and that's why they designed this really complex flood system. There are tunnels under the ground. There's this flood channel, and there is a series of flood gates. This is one of these gates right here. So this is one of the floodgates. This will come down like in really severe floods, like once a decade kind of thing. We can close off this part of the river. Actually, fun fact, these apartments up here, they're going to be called the floodgate apartments because they're next to the gate. Anyway, folks, I have hours of material. If my tours were up to me, I would tell war stories, and it would be like 5 hours long. and I probably sing some songs, but for right now, that's all I have for you. This seems yours. This is where I say, thank you for coming to San Antonio. Thanks for riding our boat. I hope you guys had fun, and I hope you have fun with whatever else you do tonight. So as for the next few seconds, I do need you to continue to follow rule number 1, your button and sheet. Let me get the boat tied down squared away, and then I'll kick you off. If you had as much fun as I did, feel free to tip the captain. It's appreciated and accepted. There will be a jar on my helm. It also has my Venmo and my cash app, if that's how you do it.